Well, good evening. I've got 9 o'clock Eastern time, and so we're going to go ahead and get started. We want to honor your time. We know that this is 9 p.m. on a Thursday evening. You've probably had a long week already, and so we want to make sure that you're really getting the biggest bang for your buck for the amount of time you're spending with us tonight. We are StudyRight, and tonight we're going to be talking about how to help distracted students get and stay focused. Quick introduction of myself. My name is Skylar Anderson. That is my family there in that picture with me, my 10-month-old little chunk of a son there, and my wife. And I'm the seminar director for StudyRight. Quick little background about who we are that'll kind of help us frame the issue that we're going to be talking about tonight, which is distraction. It's a significant issue for most students. And so a little background about StudyRight. In 2011, we started teaching study skills to students in the Raleigh-Durham area. Now, when I was in high school, I was kind of the initial founder of StudyRight, and I had a teacher invest in me for about 2 solid weeks, not getting into the schoolwork, just really spending 2 weeks on study skills. Now, that seems like it might have been a little bit of an odd way to go about things, but because of that, I was able to achieve a whole lot of academic success, and sometimes in areas where I really shouldn't have had any business getting the kind of grades that I got. Why? Because not that I'm some brilliant super genius, but rather I had the right skills. Now, StudyRight was started going, I think that we can take these same skills and provide a broader access to students so they can have the same kind of experience. Now, we started doing that initially through individual tutoring sessions. We expanded into groups of 5 to 20 students, a lot of times with some 501c3 partners in the Raleigh area. As well as we've recently kind of moved into a larger group setting. So in July, we had a group that was somewhere between 50 and 100. And I'm not exactly sure the numbers on that. And this fall, we're looking to have a larger group as well. And then we've also done online webinar format courses. Now, why in the world spend time telling you what we've done? Well, because there's been a consistent element in every single piece of these areas that we have taught study skills in over the last several years. Focus is always one of the biggest self-reported hurdles that students talk about. Without fail, it is a significant issue that students recognize. They recognize that in general, they're probably not getting as much out of their study time as they want to be, but they aren't always sure exactly what to do about it. And that's what tonight's about. We want to help make a difference there, and really for both parents and educators, give you some tools that you can then in turn pass on to students to help them make a difference. So here's our goal today. It's really pretty simple. We want to give you some practical takeaways to help the students in your life start to improve their level of focus. That's it. We're going to be fairly modest here. We're just going to give you a few of them. We're going to also kind of help frame up the conversation for just a few minutes. And then we'll let you go back to relaxing for the rest of your evening. Hopefully you can get some downtime before starting your Friday morning fresh. So you may be saying, great, that sounds great, but isn't that easier said than done? Yes, it is actually easier said than done. And that's been the experience most students have had, that while they want to be more focused, it's a lot easier to say that than it is to actually get focused. Now, why is that? A big part of that is because multitasking has become the new normal. A lot of times that's technology driven. People today have more connectivity, more interactivity, more constant bombardment of information and updates coming at them than they've ever had before. I mean, the reality is it's 9 o'clock on a Thursday night, and you have the ability to, from your home, to log on very simply and have a conversation about being focused with a really very, very easy connection here, right? Why is that? Well, technology has just allowed for a new level of multitasking, a new level of connectivity. In fact, there's a good chance that in something like this, you may actually be multitasking at the time. Now, is this a good thing? Well, depending on how important it is, maybe it's a fine thing. If you want to check your email and watch TV at the same time, that's maybe, not a big deal. But when it comes to being a student, maybe there's some other things that we need to think about. So Psychology Today put out an article recently called The Myth of Multitasking, and they kind of investigated this thing. What about multitasking? Is it really that big of a deal? Is it effective? Is it ineffective? And really what they found out was that it's not actually a thing. Okay, so multitasking doesn't really happen. Instead, your brain is just switching tasks. If you think about it that way, it probably starts to make a little bit of sense why distracted driving or texting while you're driving is such an issue. Your mind can't actually focus on more than one thing at a time. So if your student is driving a car, if you've got a high school student, you probably talked to them about this, but if they're driving a car and they're texting while they're driving, it's not that they're somehow just sort of staying focused on the road and then, with just a part of their brain going over to the text message. No, their brain doesn't work like that. None of ours do. You have to actually focus in on the thing that you're doing. And so what they're doing is actually turning off their attention on the road and instead turning it onto their attention on the cell phone. So the same thing is an impact on students though. So really, what is that impact? What does this do for students when they're trying to multitask while trying to do their schoolwork? Well, we like to kind of use this analogy of a road trip. A lot of students understand it and they can kind of connect to it. And we find it helpful to kind of unpack some of this of what's going on with multitasking and being too connected and not focused enough and perhaps getting distracted. So think about it this way. We're in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina right now, and we're about 5 hours south of Washington, D.C. So if we were going to leave Raleigh and head up to Washington, D.C. on a road trip, it's not a bad road trip. It's a pretty drive, lots of trees, that kind of thing. So not a big deal. But if the speed limit is 65 miles an hour and it's going to take us 5 hours to get there, that seems like a good day. Let's say, though, that every time you had any kind of distraction come across your mind that took your attention away from what you were doing right there and put it onto something else. So let's say a text message came in. Let's say you got a phone call. Let's say something else buzzed in the car, whatever it is. You had to drop down from 65 miles an hour down to 15 miles an hour. What's going on there? Well, you're going to get very frustrated very quickly, especially if you're easily distracted. Now, that's it seems a little bit crazy to think about doing that every time you're distracted, dropping it down to 15 miles an hour. But what they've actually found is that is pretty akin to the way multitasking actually works. So if you're a student and you're focused in on homework that you're working on, it's not as if you can just switch over to your cell phone and then right back to the homework and stay at the same level of focus. No, instead, it takes a while to get back to that most focused state. In fact, while the research varies from report to report, our best estimate is that it takes anywhere from 12 to 20 minutes of significantly focused time in order to get back to that most focused state. Now, for most of our students, when we had this discussion, it doesn't matter what the environment is, whether we're talking to them online, whether it's in an individual tutoring session or in a large group. Most students have told us that they don't ever go 12 minutes without getting a text message or without getting some kind of a social media notification, which means this. Most of our students are never totally focused. They're never totally focused, which means it's kind of like being at that 15 miles an hour rather than that 65 miles an hour. It's going to take them a long time to really get the things done that they need to get done. We think this is an issue. We want to see students find the success that they need, and they're already busy. Right? As busy as they are, they don't have time to waste a lot of extra time being distracted and not able to cover much ground. So how can students move forward? We've got a couple of practical thoughts here to get us started. First of all, it's going to require perseverance. This is a hard thing to change habits like the constant connectivity that's going on. When it's the air that you're breathing, doing anything different will take some perseverance. That's just part of the reality. Second, it's going to require some practical steps to improve focus. So if your student is one who is easily distracted, it really struggles at times to hone in and to stay focused, one of the best things you can do is give them very specific practical steps to help them improve that focus. We're going to give you several here in just a minute. That hopefully by using some of the tips that we've given you or even finding others, doing some practical things are going to be the big difference. And when students see the difference, when they see what happens when they're actually focused, that's when students start to really improve. Number three, here's a really important piece that kind of helps pull these together is that you have to focus on the two key influences on a student's focus. Now, what are those two things? Your attitude and environment. So think about it this way. Those students who have decided that they already hate biology, they are not going to be able to focus on their biology homework. If the story that they're telling themselves is that this is miserable, I hate it, there's no way I should be doing this, I don't even like my teacher, I hate school in general, whatever that story is that they're saying, if that's their attitude, it is going to be extremely difficult for them to actually get focused. The other part of this is that sometimes your environment can also be a hindrance. Now, both of these things can help if you have your attitude is headed a positive direction and you've got an environment that allows you to get focused. It can be very helpful, but at the same time, it can be extremely distracting as well. Does your student have a good environment to study? I mean, there's a reason that we don't send our students to college football games to study for their tests, right? There's a reason we don't go to professional hockey games and get prepped up for that test. Why? Because that's an extremely distracting environment. So it's something to think about. Now, most of the tips that we're going to be talking to you about tonight are going to be more driven towards that environment, although the first one is really more of an attitude orientation. So with that, let's get to our practical steps here. Number one, encourage your student to self-monitor. Self-monitor. What do we mean by that? Well, very simply, what we encourage students to do is ask this question of themselves just at different intervals throughout their study session. So here it is. On a scale of 1 to 10, how focused am I right now? That's it. Very simple question, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how focused am I right now? If they're somewhere between a 7 and a 10, I would say just keep plugging and chugging. If it's more of a 5 or 6, maybe they need to really encourage themselves to focus in, remind themselves of why they're doing this, remind themselves of the benefits of being focused, but something to consider there. If it's anywhere below a 5, something needs to change. They need to change their environment. They need to take a break, maybe. Maybe if your attitude is just in such a terrible place, maybe they're not going to be able to get to that focused state. So by giving students this kind of simple diagnostic question to help them self-monitor, what we're really after here is this question. How do you measure focus? How do you measure focus? See, this is one of the difficulties that many students run into when thinking about focus. It's not something like, how good are you at solving Pythagorean theorem? And that's a very easy thing to measure. It's very easy to measure how good you are at calculus because you have a test, and if you can do it, then you're good to go. And if you miss some questions, then maybe you should have studied more, right? Very easy to measure. Your focus is not so easy to measure. What we found is that when students don't have a diagnostic tool for it, something like that question on a scale of 1 to 10, how focused am I right now? They rarely actually monitor that. So by encouraging them to do this, you're giving them a tool to help think through how focused they are. Second, traditional wisdom about environment isn't necessarily true. Now, what do we mean by this? This is a big reason that we encourage students to self-monitor. So most of the time, you've probably heard this before, that traditional wisdom says something like, get your student a desk, put it in his, the corner of his bedroom, put all of the schoolwork there, have them study there every single time. They need a lamp, they need highlighters, they need a pen and a pencil, and all their school books right there. Now, you should probably soundproof the walls and lock them in there for a couple hours and put a towel under the door so they can't hear anything, right? Now, I'm being a little extreme there, but you've kind of heard this traditional wisdom. You need a quiet place by yourself. For some students, that is absolutely true. But the reality is this is not 100% true. And why not? Well, every student learns differently. In fact, I would go as far to say that every student learns differently on different days. Maybe you've ever had this experience where you've been working on something. This could either be schoolwork or maybe you've had this happen at your job where you just were really struggling to focus that day. And what did you do? Did you just sit there and try to pound it out? Well, maybe, but sometimes it's best to change up the environment. For many students, one of the best things they can do is realize that the environment that they're in, that maybe it works 90% of the time, but today, for whatever reason, they cannot focus there. If that's the case, they should go change the environment. That little step of maybe moving from that desk upstairs to the kitchen table or going to the park around the corner, or maybe heading up to Starbucks and putting their earphones in and listening to some music while they study, something like that. But that could be a big difference in helping them get focused so that they're getting more out of that time. This isn't traditionally the wisdom, but it is the reality. In fact, there's some evidence that says by studying the same material in more than one place, that because of the subconscious mental scaffolding that your brain is doing, that can actually help boost your grades by doing nothing other than just moving locations to study the same material. So that's what we would encourage. The big key here, though, is every student needs to self-monitor, because they're really the only ones who can tell how focused they are. Number 2, turn off the tech. This kind of goes without saying at times, but we also have a lot of students who would say, yeah, I know I'm not supposed to do that, but I still don't really want to turn it off. I'm afraid that I'm going to be missing something if I turned off my cell phone. Okay, if that's your student, here's what we would encourage you to do. Try using a timer. Okay, try using a timer. So you can use a lot of different kinds of timers. You could even use the timer on their phone if you wanted to, but put their phone in airplane mode or something like that. And ask them to try spending 25 minutes disconnected from the grid. just have them disconnect for a little bit. And what they'll find is that the amount of work they get done when they're disconnected, frequently, students realize the benefit almost immediately, that they are actually more focused, they get more done in less time, and so they're willing to then get into a habit of turning off the technology to focus for very short bursts. So we would recommend trying, say, 25 minutes and then giving them a 10-minute break where they can turn it back on. Our goal here is not to, ruin their lives or anything like that, but we do want to say, if you're distracted, it's going to ultimately mean you're going to be spending more of your time doing homework when you could be doing, something else. How about number 3? Try using a vacation sheet. I don't know if you've ever heard this term or not. I'm not actually sure where the term originated, but this comes from a good teacher friend of mine who has been teaching for, I think she's been teaching for like 30 to 40 years. She's been around for a while, and she's brilliant. Was National Teacher of the Year there for a while, and is just really, really top of the line teacher. Brilliant teacher. And she's an AP European history teacher, and what she was finding was that a lot of students would come to her and say, "You've given us 4 hours of homework a night." She goes, "What in the world are you talking about? There's no way I've given you 4 hours of homework a night. This really isn't that much homework." And they said, "No, it's taking us 4 hours every night. This is all I do. I go home and I eat food, and then I do AP European history until I go to sleep." And she said, there's got to be another way around this. So she invented this vacation sheet thing. It's very simple. All right, there's a blank sheet of paper, and you put it with you. Now, basically, anytime your mind goes on a vacation, you write down where it went. That's really all that we mean by a vacation sheet. And what they found is that this had a few different benefits. First of all, it helps students put long-term habits in place. So they started realizing that when things come across your mind that are distracting to you, it's best to write it down so it's actually out of your mind and no longer an issue. And so that's a great habit to put in place. As well, they found that it was effectively boosting retention in the short term. And why is this? Because students are focused more in on what they are actually working on. And so the first story she gave me of actually using this and seeing this in action was 2 girls in her class, a couple of them who had been telling her, it takes us 4 hours every night. You wouldn't believe how much homework you've given us. And she said, okay, well, try this vacation sheet thing and see what happens. And so they brought back to her 2 full sheets of paper, absolutely full. The margins were full. The front and the back were full. I mean, so basically 4 pages of paper here, 2 front and back sheets that were just stray thoughts that were coming into their mind when they were supposed to be doing their homework. And every time one of these thoughts came in, it was derailing their ability to focus on what they were actually working on. And so, I mean, it was just the most random stuff, right? What am I doing this weekend? What should I wear tomorrow to school? What about that cute boy on the other side of the classroom? You name it. How about my dog? I should go see that movie. It was just everything. That's kind of the way all of our minds work to a certain extent. But by giving their students a tool like this, it helps them sort of capture some of those distractions, realize that they're there, and then take some tangible steps to improvement. Number 4, when in public, create background sound with headphones. And so what are we talking about here? Well, this is kind of your typical totally distracting student environment we've got a picture of here. There's no way any of these students are really, really focused on what they're doing. So how are we going to get past that? Well, actually music or a soundscape, we'll kind of talk about both, but music can have some positive effects. It can also have some negative effects, but we're going to give you a couple of effects that music can have if you're in a public place attempting to study. So what are those? Number 1, an attitude boost. Okay, music has been shown to actually elevate your mood. Now this is great, especially for those students who really, really, really don't want to be studying whatever they're studying. If that's the case, they're going to struggle to stay focused. And one way they can help that out a lot is by listening to some music that they actually enjoy. Now, if we're not saying put on Sebastian Bach or whatever, like we're not saying it needs to be something that they hate or it needs to be extremely intellectual. Just music that they enjoy is going to actually elevate their mood and allow them to focus in a little bit better. Second, it can create a distraction barrier. You've probably experienced this before, where you put in your earphones and you put the music up loud enough that you can't hear what's coming at you. And what that does is allows your mind to focus in more on what's right there in front of you instead of being distracted by the noise around you. So that constant noise that's going on around us at any given time, that actually is a distraction, and mentally it hurts your ability as a student to stay focused. So we would encourage you for these 2 reasons to consider for your student, if they're in a public place, encouraging the use of earphones. Now there is also this third piece though that says, but music can also be a distraction, especially in one particular instance. So if your students are doing anything that requires high verbal processing, so this would include reading a book, this would include writing a paper, this would include learning new vocabulary, anything that is highly verbal. If you're listening to music with lyrics, it's actually going to be subconsciously draining your mind's ability to think verbally. Okay, your mind is subconsciously processing those lyrics. Now, maybe if you're like me, I cannot for the life of me remember lyrics to any songs. My wife just harasses me about it because I'm terrible at remembering lyrics. But even in that instance, even those of us who know nothing of the lyrics that we're listening to, our minds are still subconsciously processing that information, which is taking away from our ability to focus on those verbal things. So what's our practical step here? Well, we're going to recommend 2 apps. If your student has to study anytime in public, what we're going to encourage is using these 2 apps and giving them a try. So the first is called Study. That's an image there of the logo. It's put out by a group called the Sound Agency, and we actually really love this app, and at first we hated it. So I'll actually play it for you. It's a 45-minute track. I'm just going to give you a few seconds here, a little taste of what it sounds like. Oh yeah. So you can probably hear that, right? Some birds chirping. It's got a little bit of, there's an ambient vibe. It kind of sounds like a xylophone or something, like, in an enchanted meadow, or I have no idea what it's supposed to be. But what these guys at the Sound Agency said is that this is scientifically designed to put you in an extremely focused state. Now, I thought it sounded just ridiculous. I thought that there was no way I was going to do that, and I was going to feel like a total weirdo listening to that. But I gave it a try. All right, I gave it a try. I popped it in the earphones, and I tried to focus. And for about 2 minutes, I was going, this is so dumb. I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing this. And then I looked up, and it was 50 minutes later, and I don't know how long that track hadn't been playing, but it was dead silent in my ears, and I was super, super focused and had not even realized how focused I had been. Okay, so it works. If your student gives it a try, maybe it won't work for them, but hey, who knows? Maybe that will be the magic bullet that will help them really get to that highly focused place. Number 2, Pandora. Now, there's a lot of good stuff on Pandora, some not so good stuff. We would actually recommend a station called Explosions in the Sky. If your students like, I like modern music, I like contemporary stuff, not Johann Sebastian Bach again or Beethoven. I don't want to listen to that kind of instrumental music, but at the same time, I want to actually not listen to the lyrics in the music. So what can I do? Explosions in the Sky is a band that is instrumental, but it's newer. It sounds very current, and so we would actually recommend that radio station in Pandora, just putting in Explosions in the Sky. It's not going to have lyrics on the radio station, which is great, and it allows students to still get the benefits of that attitude boost and the distraction barrier without having to worry about decreasing their verbal processing ability. And number 5, use a site blocker when studying online. So if your student is at a school where everything's online, their textbooks are online, they have to actually sign into like a learning management system or something like that, and right there at all times is that new tab opening where there's that social media or Twitter or whatever it is, it's waiting there to distract them. If that's the case and they'd say, I'm really struggling here, I keep getting distracted, what you can do is install a site blocker. Now, this is a very easy one to use. It's called Stay Focused. It's free, and if you have a Chrome browser, you just put it on there. It'll show up in the top bar, and you can get it from the Chrome store. And it's super simple because basically it just allows you to block out certain sites at certain times from distracting you, from being able to be accessed, which allows students to really kind of hone in on what they're working on without worrying about going to a site that's going to distract them and ultimately detract from their ability to study. So with that, that's a quick recap. Self-monitoring, turning off the tech, trying a vacation sheet, using headphones, and using a site blocker. Hopefully one of these 5 will really help your student improve, and that really is all we have for you tonight. So we just got 5 quick tips there for you. Hopefully that one of those will help your student really make a difference and beat the distractions, get and stay focused. We'd love to answer any questions you have. My email address is listed here on the presentation. You can also connect with us either through our website or any of those social media platforms, and I'll be sure to share this presentation with you. So hope you all have a wonderful night, and let us know if we can do anything for you. Thanks.